I'm Hans Engel from the Directors Guild of Canada. Welcome to our 20th episode of DGC Masterclass via Zoom. These are unprecedented times beyond anyone's imagining, which makes me even more grateful that you are joining us tonight. With these masterclasses, we are going behind the scenes and talking to some of the top creatives in the industry in Canada and internationally, covering directors, designers, picture and sound editors, with 2 new episodes every week. You'll receive a new link with the specific link to tune in, a new invitation with a specific link to tune in, and I'm also posting the links on my Instagram. So far, we've had Emmy-winning director Jean-Marc Vallée, Emmy-winning editor Kelly Dixon, Oscar-winning designers David and Sandy Wasco, a special event with brilliant Indigenous filmmaker Jeff Barnaby, 2-time Oscar-nominated doc filmmaker Faraz Fayyad, 2-time Oscar-winning sound editor Karen Baker-Landers, Oscar and Palme d'Or nominee Adam Egoyan, Oscar-nominated designers KK Barrett and Patrice Vermette, maverick filmmaker Bruce McDonald, Oscar-nominated director, writer, producer, and actor Sarah Polley, groundbreaking director Clement Virgo in conversation with Cameron Bailey, history-making 2019 Academy Award-winning production designer Hannah Beekler, prolific director and actor Helen Shaver, Oscar-winning legendary Star Wars picture editor Paul Hirsch, award-winning groundbreaking director Mina Shum, renowned director, writer, and actor Casey Lemons, a special edition celebrating the release of Christian Sparks' sophomore film Hammer, and world-renowned production designer Claude Perret. All those can be found on the DGC National and DGC Ontario YouTube channels. Tonight, I'm very pleased to introduce our moderator. She's a writer, producer for film and television. She famously co-wrote the screenplay adaptation of Crazy Rich Asians and the screenplay for Raya and the Last Dragon for Disney Animation Studios, scheduled to be released in March of 2021. A Malaysian native of Chinese descent, she moved to the US at 19 and graduated from Emerson College in Boston. She's written and produced multiple primetime TV dramas, including One Tree Hill, Private Practice, and Lethal Weapon, and was the co-showrunner executive producer of Star-Crossed. She's been named amongst Elle's Women in Hollywood Power List and Variety's Women's Impact Report. Currently, she's working on an original feature comedy, which has been acquired by Lionsgate. In Los Angeles, welcome Adele Lim.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Hello, thanks for joining us. It's fantastic. And I'm thrilled to introduce tonight's featured guest. She was previously a writer and executive producer on the CBS police procedural Cold Case. She worked as a print and broadcast journalist in New York City in film distribution at Third World Newsreel, and as an alumnus of New York, and is an alumnus of New York University's Graduate Film and Television program. Her short films have been screened internationally, including at the Berlin International Film Festival. She created The Killing, which many of you will know, which was nominated for 6 Emmys, including for her writing, as well as a Writers Guild of America nomination for Best New Series. She was featured in the Hollywood Reporter's 2011 Power Showrunners List and Variety Women's Impact Report. Her recent Emmy Award-winning TV series 7 Seconds on Netflix is an ensemble drama centered on the hit and run of a young Black teenager by a white police officer. Her feature film, The Lie, which she wrote and directed, premiered as a gala at the Toronto International Film Festival and will premiere on Amazon in the fall of 2020. Her most recent series, The Stranger, debuted on Jeffrey Katzenberg's groundbreaking Quibi mobile platform in April 2020. Also in Los Angeles, welcome Veena Sood.
Hi, Hans. Hi, Adele.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you both here. Now, before I turn it over to Adele and Veena, I'd like to point out to our viewers the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to send in questions throughout the masterclass using that button. They'll try to get to them as they go and likely more towards the end. They probably won't be able to get to all of them, but be patient and they'll certainly do their best. That's it for me. Adele, Veena, have a great conversation and I'll see you at the end.
Thank you. Okay, so first of all, I am so excited to be doing this with you. For those of you who are tuned in, thanks so much for coming and checking us out. Veena and I go way, way back. We started out as baby writers in network 1-hour drama. And at that time, as far as we knew, we were the only Asian females in the space. And we both had corgis, which was enough to, I feel like, make us want to seek each other out and just cling on to each other for dear life. But anyway, so it was a long time ago, but she's, gone on to do amazing things in the writing and directing space and has had such amazing evolutions in her career. And so I'm hoping to cover so much of that today. So I thought we'd actually really kind of start from the beginning, even before you got to LA, you were at NYU. And I think what people might not have known is that, you started early on as a writer and director, and that you were also a single mother. Can you talk a little bit about that experience, what your goals were at that time and what brought you out to LA?
Yes, I was a single mom. I was in film school at the same time. It was a heady time. It was extraordinarily difficult. It was just absolutely discipline, just having to balance having a small child and then, shooting a film for, 12 to 14 hours a day. And it was an amazing time, though, to be at NYU and to be able to devote myself, because I'd been working prior to film school and supporting my child. And it really actually felt like a vacation, to be completely honest, because all I was doing was making and studying film and not, having to like hustle to pay the bills. So it was an opportunity and a privilege. I came out to LA after NYU. I directed reality television for a year, which was just really, a decision maker in terms of I really need to, by hook or crook, get into scripted. And I had gone through a directing program at NYU, so we wrote our own material, but it was not the writing program. So I was going to submit to the Disney directing program, and I decided I had some scripts that I really loved that I would submit instead, and I had a feature. And around the same time, I was a big fan of Tom Fontana's Oz, and he was in New York shooting, and I was desperate to get on that set and just absorb kind of the incredibleness of Oz, for those of you who are aware of that show. And Tom met with me and he said, come visit, as a director. He's very generous, with young talent. And, mistakenly, I thought one way to get into the Tom Fontana camp would be to write a television script for him. And I'd never written a television script before. That's not what we learned at NYU back in the day. Back in the day, it was all film. So I literally looked up how to write a television script on the internet. And I did it completely incorrectly. I wrote it like a film script. There was no act breaks. There was no understanding of 4 or 5 act structure. I watched Oz. I understood, ABCD storylines, and I started to write, and I fell in love. I fell in love with TV. Because you get to, and I said this before, it's like you just get to play God, with these incredible characters, and you get to live with them in a way that it's almost like a friendship that goes on for years, where you get to know somebody and you get to go through different arcs and journeys with them. And so that made me decide I'm going to submit myself as a TV writer to the Disney Fellowship. I love that script, and I love Oz, and I got the worst advice early on in my career by someone who said, it's too dark. Like, no one wants to look at that stuff, by someone in the industry. And I said, I don't care. Like, this is who I am. And then, of course, that's the script that got me into the Disney Fellowship, got me to LA, got me all my meetings, and everyone was secretly a fan of Oz.
Oh my God. Well, you skipped over an important part. What did Tom Fontana think of your script?
Tom didn't read it. Like, it was like the worst error ever, right? To try to write a spec for showrunners. It was misguided, but I think he appreciated the effort. But to this day, he's a wonderful mentor and friend. So
that's amazing. And it all really speaks to the importance of like mentorship and also, you know, just like self-initiative of you seeking him out, even all the way from the East Coast and, you know, making your way, making your connections there and then coming out here. So you applied to the writing program over here, obviously got in, and that was
and
your
Disney,
start.
yeah, and just for those who do not know, those programs have definitely been the door by which many, you know, writers of color and directors of color have walked into the industry. You know, it's an entree, you know, to really bring in underrepresented writers, female writers of color, and that was how I got in. It was a rigorous program. It's a year-long program where you meet TV personnel and learn kind of the whole ecosystem of this world, and then they place you on shows as a fellow, a diversity hire, and it's a pretty ingenious. It was at the time way to approach making rooms less white. I think that we need to go much further than that. And that's something we can talk about because especially at this time, it's really time for our industry to make some massive changes and real changes along the lines of defund the police. What our industry's been doing has not been working in making our rooms, writers' rooms, and everywhere else more equitable and representational. So it's time for some real change.
I'm so glad you brought that up, and we'll get into it also, I think, a little later on. But the programs you mentioned, you know, whether it's Disney Fellowship, the CBS program, all the major studios have their own fellowships, and CAPE, the Coalition of Asians and Pacific Islanders in Entertainment, also has been great with that. And I remember, and I don't know if you had, you know, the same chip on the shoulder about being the diversity hire. I know I did. And we've been talking about that a lot more in the space. But, you know, I think Matt Damon probably brought it into the forefront years ago on Project Greenlight when they talked about diversity in movies. And he said, you cast the film, but you don't cast the show. Like, you know, it's not bothering to diversify the people behind the camera. But what we've seen is that you can't just, you know, mix up the cast. It's all the gatekeepers up and down the ladder that we have to contend with. And, you know, which is interesting, you know, going back to your journey, because I would assume that you were the only person of color on a lot of writing staffs that you were on. But early on, you were brought into Cold Case. And so, you know, to talk about that, you know, again, it was run by Meredith Stein, who's a female showrunner. And you went from a very short period of time from being staff writer, like, or story editor, a junior writer, to running the show within a very short period of time, like I think maybe like 3 years, was it? And if you could talk a little bit about that experience, or, you know, and for the people listening in, that's not typical at all. It takes many years to sort of work your way up the ladder, and some people get all the way up and still don't get to run their own shows. If you could talk a little bit about, you know, what you think you brought to the table that Meredith saw and felt like she wanted to groom you for that position, you know, and don't be modest or I'll jump in and hype you.
You know what, I have to say though, Adele, seriously, like, you know, I did, there was an affinity between the showrunner, the creator, and myself creatively. So there was a natural, she gave me a lot of scripts to write the first year, which is unusual for staff writers. You know, if you're lucky, you know, you get one or two. And so I got to do a lot of writing. I got to learn a lot. She's a writer who came up, you know, in the old school way of making television, which is writers become producers and are on set all the time, which apparently is changing now. So I was on set so much that I fell asleep twice driving home in my car because I was so tired. I was going home to my son. Yeah, but I think, and I really want to emphasize this because the longer I'm in this industry, the more I know this is true, is it was Meredith and her equitable, fair treatment of her entire staff, including myself, that allowed me to go from where I was as a staff writer to the showrunner, because she looked at me not as a diversity hire or as a female hire, but as a writer who was writing a lot of scripts. And when the time came for her to give her baby over to someone that she 100% trusted, she gave it to the person who she trusted. And to feel that type of regard as an equal and as a creative force was a very original and unique experience for me up to that point. And I am forever grateful, and that has created an environment and a legacy for me to do the same for, you know, other writers of color and female writers.
100%. And I'm really glad you brought up the aspect of mentorship again. I think what we found, you know, whether it's in TV or film, mentorship has everything to do with, you know, attaining those higher ranks of showrunner or director. And a lot of times, I try to explain to a lot of panels that I'm on, there isn't some weird racist Illuminati trying to cut out women or people of color, but they, a lot of show runners and creators can't help but, you know, mentor somebody who reminds them of themselves. And I think a lot of what you're talking about in the space is just to be regarded as a peer or an equal, as opposed to an other. Because when you look at the structure, a lot of people who do get those mentorship opportunities or those opportunities to fail tend to be someone who looks like the showrunner or, you know, shares the same background as them. And, you know, you really were able to connect with Meredith on that way. But also to your credit, because you kind of glossed over it, the whole thing about staff writers, you know, not being given a lot of scripts. Staff writers barely get any scripts, if any. And, you know, the ability to sort of knock it out of the park, like right off the bat, is tremendous. So I don't want to undersell that. But, you know, so you ran Cold Case for a couple of years. And then I want to talk about, you know, moving on to The Killing. And with every major player, it seems like there is one project that sort of catapults them into the next level. And I really felt, you know, that for The Killing, that was yours. It right out of the gate, it, you know, created such a buzz and garnered so much attention. Can you speak a little bit about your process in terms of, you know, why you wanted to tell that specific story, and, you know, why you think it resonated so much with the audience and the industry at the time?
It was a story, as someone who had come off a procedural, there were so many things in the real life drama of criminal justice that I was interested in. I was interested in the mistakes the police make. I was interested in the price of a life and how that's calculated. I was interested in real police work, real corruption, real humanity that then influences decisions that are made, that are good or bad, as, you know, we clearly have seen today. And I was interested too in flipping ideas of the genre on its head, and really taking a female lead and revolutionizing the way that women up to that point were seen, especially in procedurals. And not in any sort of, again, we write from what we know and what we care about. And so what I cared about deeply was seeing women who acted like me, who looked like me, who were flawed like me, who were not good mothers. And at that point, if you, you know, I just remember, you know, there was so much television I was watching at that point, and constantly seeing, you know, the sacred cow of motherhood represented one way over and over and over. And it was usually, she's quippy and she's fun and she's got her hair down and she's feeding the pancakes to the kid. And, you know, and it's just like, I know nobody like that. I know no human being like that. You know, I put a granola bar in his backpack and that's it. You know, like if I'm working, you know, and especially as a single mom, like it was really important that we get to just see a different type of female human being on screen. The kind of like, it was interesting because things have changed now. That was a while ago. That was 10 years ago that Sarah Linden came on the scene. Taking makeup off an actress is apparently a revolution, you know, in 2010.
I think,
Uh,
well, I really felt like that's why your female protagonist for The Killing was just so um, compelling. And we were just immediately drawn to her. Like she was constantly like chewing this nicotine gum and, the no makeup of it all. And, that she didn't have like that 1 Hour Network glossy hair. And so was all of this like a deliberate creative choice on your end?
100%. Like it was very important that this character look like a human being who goes to work. And every single female homicide detective I had met up to that point looks like her. She has to wear flat shoes because they run. She
Yeah.
has to have a coat because training. She has to have her hair up. There's no thong and there's no curly cues going on. She's a working woman. So I wanted to represent that on the screen. And it was really shocking as a new creator to realize that not only was I violating, the sacred cow of motherhood, but I was violating the sacred cow of femininity as we see it on screen. There was a lot of conversations about, a little lip gloss, a little mascara, it's just like, no, absolutely not. And Patty Jenkins directed the pilot, and Patty is an incredible woman, incredible artist, tough as nails, and it was wonderful to have her as a partner, fighting the battles that we fought for Sarah and for all the other characters to be as steeped in reality as possible. And that included, just the victim's family. Again, there was this, we wanted to kind of crack the nut of this veneer over crime drama. And one of them was we wanted to see the true devastation of a young girl's murder on a family. And we wanted to see what the home would look like over the course of time as the family dealt with the grief of that. And we also wanted to see what a home looks like when 3 children of varying ages live in it. And so Patty and I, when we were shooting the pilot, we would go on set, and there's this whole kind of TV idea of reality in a home that and all of us who live in homes with children know is not real. And so we would literally, go into the cereal boxes on set, take out cereal and start talking and walking around and eating the cereal and going like this and like letting it drop on the floor and tell Seth, don't touch it. Like, these are children, they're walking through their home, we want this, mess up the, the drawings on the fridge, put things back incorrectly. Like, this space has to feel like a lived in space. I have to 100% believe a family lives here, even subconsciously, in order to feel their grief. And so there was a lot of stuff we were trying to, even on a very subtle level, portray.
But that's so amazing. And it just speaks to, the fact that, again, we're not going to make this all about like, you being a woman necessarily creating a show, but the importance of having that point of view because it's so underrepresented. There's an idea from the studio thinking that, America's only interested in female heroines if they've got their makeup on, right? And I think what The Killing showed is that they really fucking don't. That if you create a compelling story and a compelling character, we are going to show up for it. And just the little details you're talking about and being able to have Patty Jenkins as this ally on set, being able to fight with that vision, with you, sounds like a tremendous partnership and, being able to have that in that space. And I want to talk then a little bit more about The Killing before moving on too. So it's the double-edged sword of having a show that, just consumes the industry and the zeitgeist in the moment, which was everybody was so taken with it that it created a little bit of a backlash with the finale in the first season, because there was a procedural element and you had ended it on an unconventional note. And so now that you've had some space and some perspective, I think would be very curious to hear about how you dealt with it, how you felt at the time, and now looking back on it, what your perspective is on that whole process.
Looking back on it 10 years later after starting the show, I think that to be the first or one of the firsts to try anything new creatively will inherently bring on the critics in sometimes the worst possible ways. And now, of course, everyone's doing it. Everyone's doing exactly what we were doing on The Killing, the season-long arc. But New York One had done that before, Stephen Bochco's show. But you know, it was very illuminating to see how viscerally people reacted to it, and also to feel the level of vitriol that at points I started to realize was definitely misogynistic, and definitely was not the type of language and tone people would use with a white male creator. The amount of times I was asked to apologize, the amount of times I was told I was the most hated woman in America, the amount of times I was told that my intelligence and understanding of my subject matter was deeply flawed, and I was not intelligent, and I was grouchy. For I guess I should have been smiling while I was being assaulted by the critics. But it was a very interesting, it was painful, certainly. And the fans whom I deeply care about, were not people I wanted to deceive in any way. That was never my intention. But I think it's part and parcel of being the first in something, and then part and parcel of being a female creator of color that then has to deal with vitriol. And there was so much coded language that was coming out at the time that I was shocked by, like, let's take out the pitchforks and get her.
Seriously, like literally that line?
Literally that line. And it was, it was almost like I was just, why isn't anyone commenting on this? Because if I tried to comment on it, I tried to do it once, and I said, look, guys, I don't think anybody, I don't think, David Chase or Matt or Lindelof, Damon was quite treated this way, or was asked to apologize. And instead of saying, yes, you're right, they were not, the critic then said, why are you comparing yourself to them? You're not as talented as them, nor as intelligent. So there was this really, and as people who've been in the industry for a while now, you and I, what's happening now is so wonderfully welcome. The amount of blatant sexism, and racism that was happening was blatant, and unfortunately no one talked about it, or came to my defense, and when I tried to, well, I was a dummy and I should shut up. So.
No, not at all. And I think the difficulty, like you said, that you were being a trailblazer and trying something different, while being female and a person of color. And I think, just to mention it too, I think the way, you and I came up in the industry, the impulse was to not talk about it, because knowing that the way you would be viewed is that, we're just trying to paint ourselves as victims. But I think a lot of times what the public is unaware of is that female showrunners in particular, they get trolled with the most disgusting sort of rape language you can imagine. And it is the kind of scrutiny and the kind of hate that male showrunners generally do not have to contend with at any level. And that hasn't been given any amount of attention or visibility. And more often than not, the female showrunners tend to not want to bring attention to that. But I think we've all reached the point where, no, we have to talk about it. And I think a big part of that, as you mentioned, that we need our allies, that a lot of times we cannot be seen as sticking up for ourselves, because then we're, again, casting ourselves as victims, we're looking for attention. Whereas a lot of times with harassment, abuse, allegations, or even dealing with attacks, as you were talking about, you tend to look around and go like, guys, like, your pals, like, be good to jump in here at this moment. I'd like to take a moment. We've got some questions rolling in, and just specifically for the killing, we have a question about, your creative plans for the killing. Did you know exactly what the ending was going to be and what the process and how things would play out from the beginning, that what the end vision was going to be when you started the project?
The very end of the series, or the end of the first murder? I'm going to say the end of the series.
I'm going to guess the end of the series.
I did not know. I had a very, I had an impulse for where it might end. And that is, I think, one of the wonderful things about television is you do go on a journey. You know, you do not, I did not know it would end in the way it did. And, you know, it surprised me as much as all my writers that, you know, Lyndon and Holder would be standing there at the end together. But it was, yeah, it was a discovery, you know, over years of where their characters might end their story.
Right. That is a wonderful thing about the television format that you've brought up, this thing that it's like this living, breathing thing that you evolve with, like a child. Oops. And there's one more question, since we were talking about, you know, you dealing specifically with the backlash of the killing. One of the questions is, you know, did you ever have a time where you doubted that you were on the right path? And can you share about a moment, you know, a darker moment where you decided, you know, you were going to keep going? And let me see. Yes, I think that's the gist of the question, of like a dark moment where you decided, you know, did it make you question where you were or what you wanted to do? And if not, what made you want to go on?
Post-killing, post-backlash?
I think the question was more of a general time. Was there a time when you doubted you were on the right path? But since we came off of the killing, it seemed like the fitting time to ask it.
You know, the whole time I was doing the killing, every day. The beginning, certainly, of any project was with the killing and with 7 Seconds. You know, especially when you're in the writer's room, especially when you're just kind of grasping for what might become the story and what might become the journey, and whether any of us want to go on it for as long as you'll have to go on it on a TV show. Yeah, I mean, there were, in terms of dark moments, I felt like the backlash after season 1 was certainly a dark moment. I knew that it was worthwhile to continue to tell the story. And it was really important for me, you know, and my writers and the directors, you know, we had become very much a family during the course of the killing, to continue to tell this story in as nuanced a way as possible, and not let the white noise of kind of what was happening in the world around us in terms of critics start to kind of, there was not going to be creativity by committee. Like, that was not going to be happening. You know, there was fear when we came back in the writer's room, you know, a feeling of stepping on eggshells because we had been so attacked. And one thing I felt was true is the only job you have, you know, as a writer, as a creative, as a creator, is the only thing we know is what we know. And tell a great story. And don't, you know, as much as possible, put the feathers around your eyes and try not to see anything else but what's in front of you and what moves you, you know, and what makes you feel something, because that's our only compass, you know. And so that was a really important thing to hone, and has been, you know, because I think for anybody who's in the creative space, every single time you sit down in front of your computer or go to a set, it's just like, what the hell am I doing?
And, well, you brought up the thing, you know, that the great piece of advice of having this singular vision and trying to not be affected by the millions of voices weighing in. A question that just came in, which, you know, made me smile a bit, was, you know, is there something that needed to be rewritten, and what was it? I think, you know, and again, not to be dismissive of it, but I think what people don't often see is how collaborative a process making a TV show or a movie is, that it's not just a writer and a director deciding this is what it's going to be. Beyond the time where you hit like critics and the audience, there are all these levels of production companies and studios and networks and everybody weighing in, and people's managers. And if you get into a people-pleasing space, there is like the death of 1,000 cuts, and you have to be the one holding the story all the way through. And so it is this difficult thing to navigate, especially for people starting out, I think, of what do you need to be open to, what do you need to learn, and what do you need to really hold on to. And it seemed like for you, you know, you've always had a clear idea of the story you wanted to tell. And I think might be a good point to pivot to the 7 seconds of it all, because again, 7 seconds, similar to The Killing in that, you're in a procedural space, but it is, and it was also critically acclaimed. And I feel like in tracking your career and watching this kind of stories that you feel compelled to tell, that you were very prescient, or just more socially woke than a lot of us. And when you were talking about, taking down golden cows, like the one of motherhood, but there's also the one of the procedural cop show, and which has been getting a lot of buzz lately about how have, cop shows and the depiction of police in TV have affected, how mainstream America thinks about the police. And that's really never been the angle that you've taken on in any of the shows you've worked on, that you're always looking at a slightly deeper, darker angle to it. So with 7 seconds, I feel like that's particularly relevant today, with Black Lives Matter coming in so much of the focus. And with a lot of studios making a big show of touting diversity and promising to be more aware of these like social injustices. For you, it seemed to be like part of the fabric of 7 seconds. So with, telling this story and, putting a Black family at the center of it, can you speak a little bit about, what moved you to want to tell that story and the real life incidences like at the time that perhaps, inspired you to move forward with it?
A TV show is a huge commitment. It takes decades, years, sometimes decades at other times. I spent, a good chunk of my, time on The Killing. And I knew after the next show I would create would have to be deeply worthy and meaningful to me. And I turned on the television and Ferguson was happening. Tamir Rice had just been murdered. Freddie Gray had been murdered. It was every single night watching fellow citizens being gunned down on the streets of America. And I was like, this is a story, and to my executive's credit at Fox 21, I said to her, Nancy, like, I'd like to tell this story, but no punches pulled, no kumbaya, no making white people feel good. This is a real issue of violence. This is human rights organizations are calling out the United States for what, the police are doing to its Black citizens and brown citizens. So, let's tell this story accurately. And as a journalist too, that's been part of my training. So Fox agreed. And then we did the very, very, very difficult work of selling the show, which no one wanted. No one wanted.
Can we get into that a little bit? Because, as we hear more about it now that, now they're going to be much more open to those kinds of stories, but talk about but you did manage to sell it and you did manage to get it on. And there's a certain feistiness, I feel like with you as the mother of these stories, even with The Killing and finding different homes for it and fighting for this specific story to be told. Because there is a resistance on the part of many studios of feeling that, well, people don't really care about it, or, and just to be perfectly blunt, we understand the coded messages we get in these meetings sometimes, where they come from is like, are people going to be that emotionally invested in a Black family even? And so were these things that you would talk about with your fellow producers, and, what were the obstacles in terms of like getting it sold, and why do you think you were ultimately successful in doing that?
It was certainly conversations me and my writers would have every single day, as we broke the story of 7 seconds, because we did meet a lot of noting. We met a lot of sighing, to tell the story of police violence in the Black community in 2016 was, very, 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 people resisted it, endlessly. And I do have to say, what has always surprised me is whenever, and I've done it a few times, written a scene where a police officer pulls over a brown person or a Black person and then does violence on them, the amount of conversation that I have to have around this. And, well, why does he do it? Like, that's a real question. Like, well, why would they do that? It's like, I don't know, because turn on the TV, look at what's going on in America. That's why. And so there was a lot of fighting endlessly kind of through the whole process, and well worth it, because by the time, we had this beautiful family of the writers, who believed in the project, who fought for it. And then we went, into production with the directors who were hugely passionate about the show, and the cast. And so, yeah, how it got made, I don't know. I'm really happy that, the selling process was very much, we don't want it, from pretty much everybody. Netflix said yes, and very happy for that, very grateful for that. We had a prior relationship on The Killing. They had brought The Killing back twice, with me. So they were certainly, allies at the time when I was selling the show, and then got it on the air.
That's tremendous. And Netflix has just had, there was just a write-up on it saying it's at the forefront of Black-led or, Black-centric storytelling, and all the other studios have been caught on its back foot. And just to touch on a small thing, because you talked about, the arguments you would have to get into. And I think we found that, it has a lot to do with the point of view of your executives and of the creators. And a constant thing that comes up is that this skepticism of like, well, a cop wouldn't do that if it wasn't just or right, or they had a reason to suspect this person. And I think what we've realized just in talking to people, like just the simple thing of having Black and brown friends, is this, that every single Black man I know has been, pulled over by the cops multiple times, within a week or a year, and been thrown to the ground for no reason. Whereas if you are a white person, chances are that it has never happened to you. And if the majority of your friends are white, then it's never happened to them. And so you're a little bit skeptical when it comes to other people's stories. So bringing back to you and the arguments you would have, was there a certain degree of diplomacy you would have to put on, in trying to make your point? Because, on one hand, you feel, I feel like the burning of the righteous anger. At the same time, you have a project to make and you want, to have as many allies as possible. Did you have a certain mindset as to like, how am I going to make this point? How, or do I just go pure aggression?
It was a combo effort, a combo platter of pure aggression meets diplomacy, meets trust. When you get on the set, you can do whatever you want,
Yeah.
Trust that the actors, will hold the truth of what happens in this time, and regardless of what happens, pre that, when you're on the set in that moment, that'll be the truth,
Right.
As you want it to be. So,
Got it.
Yeah.
My God, mad respect. And you, for those of you who don't know, those arguments, they happen all the time, every day, and it takes a lot out of a person. Well, we spent a lot of time on the television space, and I think we're all really dying to get into you going back into directing. So post The Killing, and I remember having dinner with you probably at like, Gratitude Cafe or something. And you were talking about this crazy movie you were shooting. You were driving out to the desert and like had no money and we're just going to be shooting this damn thing. So you, in that period, you did The Salton Sea and The Lie, and two very different projects. And so what made you really want to pivot back into directing?
I feel like when you're a showrunner, when you're a creator for television, so much of what you are doing is the vision, anyway, of the show. And there's a lot of, as you know, having co-show on a show, there's the grind, there is the endless grind of 9 months in the trenches, and, and so what I was looking for was a radically different experience, and pure creative experience. And so I did direct an episode of The Killing, and it was joyous. It was joyous to be, in the creative space at every single moment of my day, in prep and while we were shooting, and then post is a whole other, really fun creative time for a director. But, when you're monofocused on one thing. So I was I was tired. You know, I run 2 shows or run 3 shows and created 2 shows. And I was looking for something that would allow me to play creatively, but not, you know, have to grind 5 scripts out simultaneously while I was cutting 2 and then dealing with some nonsense on set and then pleasing, you know, the network by giving them the pitch for season 5.
Got it. Yeah, no. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, being a TV showrunner is possibly the hardest job in the industry. I feel like it's a 2-person job at minimum, and it just grinds you out. But you know, we talked about the fear of getting back into directing also, because you hadn't done it for a while. And you know, can you speak a little bit, you know, as to those fears, and also that, you know, there are very, very few women in the directing space. And I think a big part of it is it's such an opaque path. It's not like you're assistant director and then you become director. It just seems like directors are kind of born fully formed into this world. So, you know, getting back into that of just like, you know, what you think your internally, what your biggest holdups were, jumping back into directing, and also, you know, like, is there a clearer path to it, particularly for people who are a little bit outside of the system?
Yeah, I mean, I think the clearest path is for you to write your material, you know, and then ask and demand that you be attached as the director. And I'm sorry, demand, like, don't ask, like, say, you know, yes, you can have this, you know, and I'll be attached to direct. And I can't wait, you know, to see your opus when it comes out.
We'll see.
You're directing too, which I'm very, very excited about. I think that, you know, again, writing your own material, attaching yourself, and then, as you know, finding a producer who believes in it. I had the great fortune to work with Alex Madigan, who's just phenomenal, and very quickly got a green light on the lie at Blumhouse. And Blumhouse, I like to say Jason is the Roger Corman of today. Jason Blum, because he greenlights so much. There's so much possibility, you know, in his on his campus, on the Blum campus, and there's so much going on. And the horror space and thriller space is kind of a cool new subverting space, you know, as we saw with Jordan Peele's work. And so, and you know, the Invisible Man. So to be there was really extraordinary, and to be able to go as fast as we went. I think I got the green light from Jason 2 weeks after the script went out wide, and then we were prepping in November. So I got the green light from him end of August, and we were prepping in November.
That's tremendous, because I think the stories you hear more often than not in the feature space is that development can take forever. And that from the time you start writing, particularly, until the time, if you're lucky enough to get it made, can be years, sometimes even decades. Do you think it was really like your relationships and your experience being a television showrunner and having directed a couple of episodes of TV that really set you up for that?
You know, I think it was at the time. I think that it was, you know, Jason was a fan of The Killing, and he knew the show really well, so he had confidence, you know, in me. But I think, you know, there are places like Blumhouse that is actively, you know, because they have so much content and so much output, they are actively looking, you know, for directors and breaking in newbies, you know, relative newbies. So at least that was my experience. And I know, you know, I've known Jason now for a while, and Cooper, and they're constantly asking me to suggest directors to them, which I'm doing. But yeah, no, it was really a treat to do it. And the budgets are so low that, you know, there's the ability to greenlight that many projects at a time.
Right. And you also brought up an earlier point that I want to circle back on before we talk about your next thing, which is to demand to be part of something versus asking for permission. And just to make it all about me for a second, that, you know, I had an offer to direct a project that I'd written, and I had a lot of anxiety going into it because, again, it's not my, you know, my pocket, and being able to have you to talk to and bounce ideas off of, and, you know, get advice on the general layout of things was tremendously helpful. I think, you know, for a lot, there are a lot more women in the writing space than there are in the directing space. So just again, your advice of, if you are fortunate enough to be one of those women who, can sell a piece of development and be in a strong enough position, or even if you're not, it does not hurt to demand it. It does not hurt to say, and I am directing this, make them talk you off of it.
Right.
And I think, even within my circles, like we've been surprised of like a lot of times, instead of complaining about like we were not given an opportunity or we asked for it and didn't get it, more often than not, if you just demand something or assume you're going to get it, that people are more inclined to give it to you.
Yeah, especially now. There's a little bit more awareness, or there is more awareness now.
Right.
That, there's a dearth.
Yeah. Well, so with all of that, then you directed those movies and did well. So then it sort of set you up then for your project after that with Quibi, The Stranger, which I checked out over the last week, and I fucking loved it so hard. I can't even tell you, people. If you haven't, please go check it out. And what was so exciting about it was that it's completely new. Like, we've been in this TV platform bubble, very super structured for so long. And with the streaming platforms, it gave us more flexibility in terms of act breaks and not having to have as many commercial breaks, and having to do like 6-act structure, which is fucking crazy for anybody. But with Quibi, you had a new format, a new platform, but it's also a new way of telling stories. And I'm so excited we get to talk to you about this, because it's almost like a voice from the future. Everything is changing so fast now. It's exciting to hear from you, like, your process of how you thought about it creatively and also just logistically. And we have a lot to cover here, but first I want to talk about the creative part of it, just the story, how you came up with it. There is, for those of you unfamiliar, the main protagonist is a female Uber driver who's moved to LA and has her dreams. And, she picks up a passenger who, is really problematic. But what was so wonderful about it is that it is so accessible and relatable. And then suddenly it takes all these everyday aspects of our lives, like calling an Uber, talking to a stranger, and then quickly turns it into this thriller. And then you're off into this insane journey throughout LA. So, talk a little bit about like why you wanted to tell the story and, why this character.
Part of it was just my love letter to Los Angeles, and I have not shot in LA since 2008. So a desperate desire to be home, to stay home, and see a city and see parts of the city that we usually don't see on the big screen. To see parts of the city that I love and I'm familiar with, and I go to. The story itself of an Uber driver who's stalked over the course of one night by a lunatic, it really came from, it was predicated on the format of Quibi. So it wasn't a script or even an idea that I think I would have naturally gravitated to. It's very, high octane, super propulsive, a lot of camera movement, a lot of running, action, visual effects, stuff that I don't usually, naturally gravitate to. But I was really fascinated by this idea of a small screen, not repelled by it, initially repelled by it. And then when I talked with Jeffrey Katzenberg, very quickly started to see how, like you said, this could be a vision of the future or a link to the future. Because regardless of what we want as filmmakers, I would love to like have just a 50-foot screen in my house and never watch anything other than on that screen for the rest of my life. But the truth is that we have these small devices that are with us, that is literally with every single human being on the face of the earth, pretty much. And we all have the exact same endorphin rush, the universal endorphin rush when beep beep happens, when you get a text. It's pretty extraordinary that the whole entire world feels something because of a thing that we're holding in our hands, that exactly alike. And so to then, as creators, storytellers, whatever, to use this device, this completely new platform, in the same way streaming, like you said, evolved storytelling and elevated it. The small device then creates a whole new offshoot of evolution in terms of storytelling. because there's an interactivity that's not fake. You know, we're so used to looking at our screens, whether, you know, at home or in the theater, as passive viewers. We have this natural interactivity with our phones. We have this Pavlovian response, not only to the ding ding, you know, and the sounds it makes and the vibrations it gives us, but the actual portraiture that we're used to looking at when we do Skype or FaceTime. There's this whole kind of neurological stuff that's going on with this device that then, like you said, you know, may be kind of the missing link to future, who knows what, evolution in terms of what we see.
Right.
Right.
Well, I mean, what was so compelling about it was, you know, and they've talked about it, that people sometimes get a serotonin kind of spike in their head when they see like likes on their thing or a ding, you know. And what was so skillful that, you know, where your stalker had a really specific alert tone to the thing. So every time it happened, that it was so skillful how you got the audience to really react the way your lead character was reacting, like that shiver of fear that goes up and down, like, you know, she's feeling it as well.
Yeah.
And I think what I enjoyed, I love it. This must be a Q&A. I'm just like fangirling over the.
Well, you know, I want to jump on that too, because
Yeah.
that is exactly what I was interested in exploring. And again, I was doing it because I do like to do new things. You know, I don't want to get, you know, I easily get bored, so I want to try something else. So what I loved about what you just mentioned, the cue, his text tone, what I pitched to Jeffrey, and we ended up not being able to do it, unfortunately, because of technology limitations, ironically, was I wanted that text tone not only to play, you know, obviously throughout the show. Every time this poor woman is running from this lunatic, he's stalking her via phone and he's sending her texts and calling her, and it's the same exact text tone. And so that's creating a Pavlovian response, like you said, of fear. But what I wanted to do initially was have the show drop every hour. So it would replicate her story. So she's running over the course of a night. This show itself would then drop at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. So following kind of every episode would follow, you know, her trajectory in her timeline. And every time an episode drops in your phone, you would hear the Carl E., the crazy guy's text tone. So, you know, over and over and over, you'd be hearing this text tone, dread, whatever would be happening. And then at midnight, you know, mid-season or 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., here it comes again. You know, here comes this text tone waking you up. And by then, you know, I was so curious, would an audience start at 2 a.m. be like, oh my God, it's mid-season, I have to watch the thing that happens and watch it, and then put their phone down and fall asleep and dream about it. You know, it was just an interesting way to start thinking about how to deliver story to people.
Right, but that's also you really thinking about the different aspects of this platform, and because of like that shorter 8 to 10 minute format and how it will be consumed, and, you know, just really thinking outside of the box of what is the experiential process of like enjoying this thing. And I, you know, just again to stay on the creative side for a minute, what I loved about it was, it's every TV writer's nightmare of like, you have to come up with an amazing cliffhanger at the end of this, you know, 8 to 10 minute portion. And what was great about it is like, there was always a different kind of a twist. And it felt like the story, you know, it started off as like a thriller. And, you know, she starts like driving, and suddenly the twist at the end is like, holy shit, I'm next to like a sociopathic killer. And then it becomes, you know, I can feel like your procedural training kicking in, where you're showing the audience, like, there's something more. It's not just like thrills and fear every 8 to 10 minutes. There is a deeper mystery that we're unpacking here. And then it gets into like even like a little bit of romance, you know, before again, then all of those things start like, you know, play off of each other. So how much of that, you know, were you aware of like right off of the bat? Like, you know, did you think about this as, oh, this is a regular feature that I'm just breaking down in 10-minute increments, and I'll just make sure to load a punch at the end? Or were you really sort of thinking about it in an entirely different way?
I had to think about it in a different way, because, you know, as someone, as you know, like both of us have written TV for years now, and there's a natural, there are things that are done in the mystery genre that for example, the 1 hour drama, a lot of times I will plant something at the top of the episode, which will stay with an audience, but they won't remember it consciously. But when you bring it back at the end of 60 minutes, it's like, oh, aha, right? It's that aha moment. And sometimes you have to do it 3 times over the course of 60 minutes or season. In 8 minutes, people will remember, right? You have a very radically different mindset going into something that's a haiku versus, a giant poem, the Iliad. So that in and of itself, I knew pretty quickly that every episode, if it ended on the same note, the audience would feel that. And by episode 3, they'd be like, I see the seams of what you're doing, stop doing it. So I had to then flip information on its head, that things that were taken for granted had to be then not taken for granted. Or we go into a different type of genre feel or something.
Right. No, I felt like that was so skillful, because once I got used to the thing of like, oh, something scary and unexpected is going to happen, you had a couple of where it ended like sort of like on like a lovelier note, of like a thing of like a new friendship, and that played so nicely, because then you thought like, okay, so it's not just going to be like 8 or 10 installments of like something dark and terrifying every single time. It's going to keep me guessing. I also want to, now that we've talked about like the friendship part of it, to bring in that lovely gas station attendant in there. And I bring that up because, what I found so great about the storytelling in this, there were a lot of aspects that rang true to my experience, as a woman, or to the experiences of my friends who are people of color. But you never led with that in your story. It's not all a story about, women not being believed, or this is how brown men get treated by law enforcement, but it's still there. And so when it does hit your, it feels more like it just grounds your character. It makes it feel like you're part of this believable world. But did you have to have conversations, about that, about like, this is, there's a part where, that gas station attendant guy gets, kind of pulled over by the cops and handled really roughly. And all of this was written and shot before, the latest big BLM movement. And he has, that line of like, I can't breathe while being held in this chokehold. So when I was watching that, I thought, oh my God, Veena is clairvoyant. She just knew this was going to be a thing. But, can you speak a little bit about, your research and why you felt so strongly that those aspects needed to be part of the storytelling?
I think, it happens all the time, right? Like it happens all the time. And so thank God there is some, waking up from the sleepwalk now in terms of acknowledging it. But again, I feel like, 7 Seconds was made it was developed in 2014, 2015, so this has been going on, obviously for a really long time. And in terms of where it came from, I think this is part of the bigger conversation we're having now in our industry, which is so important, is that the creators we should strive for representation, fair representation of our country, in order to actually get many, many different stories. And there is this, and you proved it yourself with Crazy Rich Asians, there is a hunger for other stories. There's a hunger,
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. And this has come up oftentimes in these panels, where I feel like the mainstream American audience is so much more sophisticated and open-minded than the studio system gives them credit for. And it feels that a lot of our industry is sort of mired in fear, because there's so much invested in a movie, so much invested in a show, where people are afraid to fail. And so it's this aping of what came before. And every time we get something amazing, whether it's The Killing, or whether it's Desperate Housewives, or Empire, where it's the storytelling that's so far out of the norm, people are just flocking to it. It's always tremendous to see. So with the creative part of it, we've addressed a little bit of it. The compelling thing for me, especially having visited you on set, I visited her on set when we were shooting in these LA tunnels. Oh, and that was also amazing because you talked about your love for LA, and having watched it now, it reminded me a lot of Michael Mann, you know, and his love letters to LA at night. Seeing these deep abandoned tunnels LA had, or in the series, like these Latino like street churches that you had, being in there, the logistical challenges of shooting something for a new untested platform of, you know, like two different like aspect ratios, you know, at the same time, how people will be consuming it. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what were the challenges you faced at the outset and how you dealt with it, you know, practically on the day?
The two different aspect ratios was absolutely the most terrifying part of this experience, and what I wanted most in terms of learning something radically new in how to shoot, and the size of the screen. The size of the screen was probably the biggest challenge, because the aspect ratio, you know, I worked with this incredible DP Paul Yee, who shot the Fits, and is incredibly lyrical with the camera. And you know, one thing I wanted to just have one monitor, because trying to look at two monitors simultaneously, that would not happen. And I also wanted to 100% be looking at performance. By the time we got on set, check the frame, watch performance. You know, I didn't want to be like, are we getting the thing in the vertical? You know, that's not going to happen. So we talked about it at length of how to guarantee, you know, within one monitor, we can always be checking. And he was wonderful. He was on, you know, always looking at the vertical frame for me, because my natural, you know, is the landscape. So we shot 3:2, and within the square, we knew, you know, we could do the cutout, the vertical or the horizontal cutout. So there was always a true frame.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a balance that I could always eye that would feel right or not. The biggest challenge, though, was to take the smallness of the screen, and actually the vertical screen particularly, because one thing that they said early on is the iPhone is made to actually be held vertically. That's a natural hold, and were for an audience member to hold it vertically the whole entire time, I was horrified that I didn't want them to have lesser of an experience than someone who's holding it horizontally. So what began as a conversation about real estate on a screen, and how, you know, we have two eyes, so we've got left, right, we've got the wide screen. That's a natural way for us to look as human beings at a vista, but we also look at depth, you know, especially when you're moving, the eyes narrow down a corridor, you know, the eyes narrow down kind of the length of where you're walking. So that actually was what created the camera movement. Is I really wanted to make sure that our eyes never felt that we were getting less, because you will feel less on a vertical screen. Again, we're so used to seeing a certain way. Our eyes are built a certain way to watch things on landscape. And I saw things that were shot vertically, and I felt less information was being conveyed. So we talked about, very purposely, every single location was chosen for its infinity lines. There were, you know, and of course, the very first episode, we're stuck in a car. So, you know, I was just like, oh my God. We tried to play with lights. What we did was a lot of stacking and racking focus, or using reflections, you know, the mirror reflection to, again, moving camera, you know, here and there, you know, focus so that there's movement inside the frame. And then in the vertical, in the infinity line, we said, let's constantly think about depth. Depth will look beautiful on a wide screen. It will also be completely necessary on the vertical screen. So even in the gas station, we pushed the candy aisles closer together, so that as she's walking through them or standing there, you feel the lines on the left and right side of the vertical frame and the horizontal, but certainly the vertical. We did that with a hallway that she was running down in her apartment. In real life, that hallway looks ridiculous. Like, it doesn't even look like it's not a real hallway. It's like some music studio thing that, you know, was abandoned because probably no one liked it. And I thought, this is perfect. You know, we need like that A to Z depth. We need that. because we don't want to be necessarily going like this with the camera. We just want to be able to feel him coming straight at us, and there's nowhere to go, trapped. Yeah, so we were at Chinatown, with the lanterns, looking up at the sky, boom, 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 boom. The train car, seats, boom, 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 lights, boom, boom, boom. You're always feeling lots of information in the screen.
That's fascinating hearing you speak about that, because watching it the whole time, and I had it on my computer, but then I also watched it on my phone just to see what that experience felt like, and it never felt closed off or claustrophobic, and it felt like there were certain creative choices too. I love, like you said, there was always depth and lines and visual interest happening, but also there was like a handheld kind of shaky voyeuristic feel, especially when she was like busting through a wall or going through a club, where it felt like it was almost made for the phone, where you're watching your best friend trying to run away from a crazy psycho killer, and you're like, oh shit, like go 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 go. And what I found so impressive about it was that so much of it was a feeling. It wasn't just like witty writing or clever procedural moves. It was that feeling of dread, and so much of that is in the visual storytelling, and being able to tell it on something that big is a huge challenge, and I feel like is a testament to you and your DP. So that was tremendous. And then I want to go back to something you brought up earlier, which was seeing parts of LA that people normally don't see. And I think it circles back to the bigger conversation of, what is the America that we are putting up for mass consumption. You had, there was a gas station, and that church, and the taqueria, in the corner, and, all these different aspects of the LA River. And you see that with different TV shows, like, Insecure shows you, like the black side of LA that nobody's ever seen. We saw yours, and there was even that bit, there's spoiler, warning, there's also bits with coyotes, which I was very, very into. But, in researching that, like, was it a lot of like your location guy, or were these things that, you just found on your own travels through LA? And was there a deeper rationale for wanting to show those parts of LA, beyond like they're so cinematic?
Yeah, I mean, again, we write and we, put on screen what is meaningful, what we love, what we want to, deify to a certain degree, and stare at, what we're obsessed with. So those parts of Los Angeles and the city, I love it. The credit, I had a wonderful location manager. I think the credit really has to go to Waze. You put Waze in your phone, you put an address in Waze, and it brings you all over the city. I mean, granted, there were many parts of the, already that I knew well, and I loved downtown and Chinatown and the Hollywood Hills. But I felt that I love this city because you're always on an adventure. It's a megatropolis. It is truly, in so many ways, the last real city in America. It's not a shopping mall, where yuppies live. It's everyone still lives here. Granted, there's tons of segregation, but it still feels at this point, and it's changing, I know, and partially because how big it is, that there's a lot of people here who are really different. Yeah. Interesting.
There's a lot of people, and as speaking as an immigrant who came here when she was 19, I think I grew up with images of America being 90210, and being, and assuming all cities in America were exactly like that, and being very surprised that that's not the reality that we live in.
Even 90210 isn't like that. Even the real 90210.
It's nothing like that. And so, we're talking about the responsibility as show creators, but there's also the creative aspect to it, that you're showing people something that they have not seen, even for, a city you think that has been so completely filmed forwards and backwards, such as LA, that we get to show them something a little bit different, or a different life experience. So off of that, and, showing spaces we haven't seen, showing stories we haven't really seen, and characters we haven't really that haven't been explored much, or been as celebrated as your white male lead. To talk just about the industry in general, like in this time where there are like strong social movements, everyone's at home, we're really confronted with the stark reality of what our what the systemic racism and the systemic misogyny that's been in many different industries. I want to talk about, it's really you as a woman, having been through all of it, like, what do you think are the issues facing our industry right now? And maybe it's helpful to come from a more personal space with it, of like, what were the challenges you specifically had to face, you think, and looking back at your career, and what do you think the industry could do differently moving forward? Because it seems like now is the kind of time and place for us to bring up those issues and try to and the industry is going through so much change that this is the time, for us to try to affect that change if we can.
Yes, for me to tell stories that were actually, and I like the word representational, because I think that, like you said, there is a desire for bounty. I think that there is the American audience, mainstream and otherwise, and us are hungry for full-fleshed, fascinating stories. The IQ, I always think audiences are way smarter than we assume they are. And, but especially with the streaming, kind of the advent of streaming, to hear, my family members, in the Midwest talk about character development and Act 2 turning points is just, what? I mean, people are so sophisticated now, and that really requires sophisticated, really different, really interesting content. And again, kudos to you with Crazy Rich Asians, that really proved it. And Black Panther, you guys really, really made it clear that, America is not only ready, but deeply hungry for different type, shows or stories. So towards that end, there is it's one thing to say that there should be more people of color in the writers' rooms. I think that's true. I think that that's what our industry has been striving for a really long time, and frankly, failing really badly at. Color of Change did that whole study of writers' rooms representation, and the numbers are pretty stark. I think it's like 85% still run by men and 90% still, run by white people. And with those numbers, our industry, our liberal industry, really looks more like the Trump administration than like America, I mean, for real. So, let's talk about the writers' rooms. Let's also talk about who are in the executive suites, who are greenlighting shows, who are at development in networks. I want to see the numbers on what that representation looks like. I want to see the numbers on critics, who's writing about shows, who's saying a show is worthy, a show's not worthy, who's saying a show where a woman is raped every night, it's genius, but a show like 7 seconds is depressing. That matters. That the fourth estate matters deeply in driving audiences to shows or letting them languish in obscurity. Who are on the awards committees? Who are giving awards to shows. I mean, it's the Academy, has been lambasted for being, yet again, another Trump administration type organization. And I think our entire industry, really, this is a time of necessary change if they want to stay relevant, if they want to keep creating content, especially in movies. I mean, that whole world is changing. Because of COVID, but also pre-COVID, except for the blockbuster, who are we? What stories are we telling? Again, yay, Crazy Rich Asians and Black Panther, but like, let's keep going. It's all subjectivity. It's all, I think it's really important to just say over and over and over and over, who are the people making the decisions, what movies and shows get made, period, full stop. Who are those people? Let's look at those numbers.
Amen.
What? Yeah,
100%. And I'm so glad you brought it up in terms of the people on the Academy who are voting, which movie gets best movie, which scripts are being nominated. what they feel is, the bar of excellence that has to be hit, and who are these, who are these experts. I think, I mentioned the Matt Damon bit beforehand, but I think the thing that grated me the most was that he followed up that comment by saying, well, when we're looking at a role or a position on the crew, we want to hire the best person. And so, and that's why we can't make an effort to diversify the crew. And the assumption given with that is that if you hire a person of color, that you are making a concession, that you are not getting the best. And, there is this prevailing attitude, and something I'm concerned about, that people, they feel at this day and age they can't speak as much, but they're still thinking it, of, if I'm diversifying my room, am I taking somebody who's not quite hitting the bar of what my expectations are, someone who can channel my voice. And I think the thing that we've really found is sort of like, who are these people making, making judgments of, this is the best writing, this is the best grip, this is, what my bar is. It feels like, going back to your experience on The Killing with Patty Jenkins, that having an ally, having somebody who can understand your story, is a big part of it getting greenlit. A, and B, all the way up and down. So on the very top level, it's the executives who are saying, you know what, I believe in this. This is a true, amazing, compelling story that I want to get behind. On that level, all the way down to the cast and crew level, where it's somebody who's, that is not how my Black grandmother would decorate her living room. And, somebody who has that life experience and can bring that to set. So with that, when you are putting your crews together, now that you are in that rare position of being a woman and person of color who can call the shots, is that something you look at in terms of, the makeup of your crew? I mean, you definitely look at it for your writer's room, but does it extend into production as well?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be everywhere. It has to be behind the camera. It has to be in front of the camera. It has to be, in the writing rooms. And towards towards your point, I think, this is what I want to avoid happening, which again, I think the industry, I mean, I came into this industry in 2002 because Disney said, we need more people of color. Right. And so in 2002, they were already saying diversify the writers' rooms. 20 years later, the writers' rooms are still 85% white. That's not progress, right? That's a failing endeavor. So to say diversify is a wonderful thing, but put your money where your mouth is. Like, what we've been doing, what the industry has been doing, is leaving it up to individuals to make decisions, granted, as they should, for their own shows. But I also think that if we're talking about systemic problems in our industry, it's because we do not have a representation that there's no accountability, for representation. So, and again, like, I think it's really important. There's been so many conversations about the writer's room and diversity and the crews, and that's fantastic. It should be. But I really want to start talking about who is greenlighting and who is creating an overall culture of the necessity of representation, on a show, at a network, at a studio. And I feel that in those rare instances where we have seen leadership be diverse, be representational, we start to see that trickle down. In the pantheon of power, writers, we're not, even show creators, we have many people above us that give us notes, that determine our budgets, that give us green lights or not, so let's look up a little bit and say, why is every single executive at so-and-so studio a white dude? Like, why does the studio look like the Trump administration? Is that going to be likely to create Crazy Rich Asians too, or not? Are we going to get yet another show about some dude who's a genius and a beautiful woman who loves him,
Oh yes, the wife who's just like, don't, just come back and enjoy your family. Don't go be crazy. Don't go chase after the bad guy. We're always like, women are always such downers in these movies, you know. And it's that thing you brought up. Like, we want to be the motherfucking heroes of our own narratives, and we want to see people who look like us also be those torch bearers. When you
And yeah, I mean, like, and you know, World War II, I appreciate many of the stories that have come out about white soldiers. That's lovely and true. You know, and those stories get greenlit because so-and-so's grandpa was, you know, a white soldier during World War II. My mother was in World War II too, and she was tortured. You know, it was a world war. It went to Asia. It went to Northern Africa. There's a whole other world of stories around World War II I've yet to see Hollywood create.
that is amazing. I feel like you and I could probably talk about this one thing for another 2 hours, but we can't. So I probably, as much as I hate to do this, love to do this, want to get to those questions, but it's just such, you know, wonderful ground that we're treading on here. We have a question about, you know, basically breaking in as a female director, and are diversity programs the only way a new director can obtain mentorship from more established directors? For those who are not in the system, you know, are there other ways to connect with them and learn from them?
You know, I don't know about how to connect with other female mentors in terms of directors. You know, there are the diversity programs. Um, you know, I think the biggest challenge for women directors, especially, and directors of color, is there's no path. You know, at least there's really no path anywhere in this industry, but at least with writers, we've got the rank and file something, you know, system. So I would say, you know, the obvious, write the material, you know, own your material, collaborate with a writer you trust, you know, if you're not a writer, option material is king, queen,
Yep.
for sure.
Yep.
So find the material, lay claim to it, make it your own, and go out with it.
Great. And also, you know, I think um, going on off of that is, shoot, like I have like so many questions to ask about like this one specific thing, but I feel like once you have some of that traction, I found in my own experience, whether it was reaching out to you or other female directors, and there are not that many of them in the feature space, where at least, you know, like Hollywood established like tentpole directors, the ones who you do reach out to, you know, more often than not are very willing to help. There was always this insistence that, you know, when I first came into the industry, like the guys would just say, oh, women are just competitive against each other. Like, you know, based out of nothing. If anything, I found that, you know, the women in the industry have been incredibly helpful and really like a soul sisterhood that have been looking out for each other, because only we know what it feels like. So it's great for you to be out there.
One thing I do want to say, though, there are the diversity programs. There's Sundance. There's IFP. There are programs that are actively looking for young female directors and directors of color. And the other thing too, you know, if there's a director you love who's a woman, like Adele was saying, eager to help, wanting to help, reach out to her. You know, send her a letter, send her a note. You know, say, you know, tell her who you are. You know, you never know. I mean, that's what happened for me with Tom Fontana. So, you know, there are a
Yeah.
lot of women willing to help for sure, and other mentors.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can't always promise that we'll be there, but I feel like in the writing space, I've mentored a lot of people who've reached out to me on social media, or, you know, like you just run into them in like a fellowship or like some mixer, and somebody, you know, somebody's story speaks to you.
Yeah.
There's another question here about, since we did talk about you being a very dark writer, and, you know, being very aware about the marginalized groups of people, you know, how do you make sure you're not harming an already marginalized group of people when you're writing certain arcs that are going into like deep waters or darker territories, that you're not casting them in a certain light?
Yeah, I mean, I think if generally every single thing that I try to do, just as a writer, and not because I'm necessarily a good person, but because it's the integrity of what I do as a writer. I want to be as accurate as possible and tell a good story. Everyone has a reason for what they do. you know? And so the humanity of every single person you put on screen usually makes the story far better. Even the incel misogynist killer in The Stranger, you know, was played by Dane DeHaan, who's an extraordinary actor. And we had a lot of conversations about where this human being came from, you know, and had to, you know, as much as the enjoyment over the demise of this person is there for the audience and is purposeful and cultivated, there is also, you know, he came to the set with a lot of backstory. So your people that you create, you know, are people.
You're absolutely right in terms of, you know, bringing up like the humanity that even in somebody, it's funny you said he was incel, like it's never said, but the moment you said it, I was like, that makes all the sense in the world. I now understand where that rage comes from. Just looking into the humanity of the character and you'll find it. And before we wrap this up, sadly, we have like a last question, which is, now that you are where you are, what is next for you? Like, what are you most excited about?
I am most excited about the next story. I'm working on 3 different projects right now. They're features. I'm excited about doing a sci-fi. I think what I'm starting to love is looking at genres and subverting them. And so to be able to look at the sci-fi, you know, genre and to poke at it is infinitely interesting. And I've been watching a lot of really good sci-fi. And the idea of how to shoot sci-fi too is interesting. If you're in a place that does not have gravity, like how does that affect? Forget aspect ratio, you know, like the experiential feeling of being in that type of space. So yeah, interested in space, interested in infinity.
I love it. And it's just exciting to hear you talk about that because, again, not a lot of female directors in the sci-fi genre space, and cannot be more excited to see what your next project is. And hopefully there'll be another panel where we can talk about all that.
Wow, I can't wait to see yours.
Anyway, thank you all so much for joining us and for these great questions. And we're going to kick it back to Hans.
Thank you so much, Adele and Veena. That was absolutely amazing. So generous and candid and inspiring. Thanks so much for joining us. Fantastic. And please join us on Thursday, this coming Thursday, for a masterclass featuring Emmy-nominated, BAFTA-winning DGC director of The Handmaid's Tale, The Loudest Voice, and the upcoming Marvel show, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Kari Skoglund. It continues to be a great ride, and we hope it's providing some relief, entertainment, and inspiration, no doubt, tonight in these incredibly challenging times. Be safe, be well, have a great night. Veena, Adele, again, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.